The wrong thing. Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. Currently, we are in Proverbs chapter 19. Um, there was just too many good proverbs to just gloss over. I wanted to apply, and one of the reasons why is this: the God, in His wisdom, gave us. I said that the book of Proverbs is wisdom that we could apply to our lives. We could immediately put this in our lives. It fits whatever in our lives, whatever, and it fits also whatever level you are in life. And this is what I mean. For example, in America, anyone can be president. It is possible, not practical. Okay, not practical, but it is possible that anyone can be president. Sure, you can. I said not practical, but possible. Contrast that with nations that have dictatorships, kingship. You could never be king. Period. Never. If you're not in the family line or whatever, you could never be king. You could never be king. So the the wisdom that Proverbs is given, you could take the same wisdom and live in a North Korea or Russia if you follow this wisdom, right? Just think about some of the wisdom. If I was in North Korea, I wouldn't blurt out stuff. That's one practical wisdom, right? I wouldn't blurt out stuff. Um, I wouldn't broadcast. I mean, we can just go on and on and on. So let's get into it. But the wisdom here, that's why I said you could apply it wherever you are in life, whoever, whatever, you and wherever you are in life, you can this wisdom you can apply. Not like the high intellectual wisdom. Okay, and enough on that. But anyway, by the way, because I'm refraining because I don't want to give the idea that I'm anti-intellectual. However, sometimes the intellectual think that they are more than what they actually are. In other words, all of the value of the intellectual wisdom, what can you do with it in your everyday life? That'd be a good question. We left off in verse 14, and it says, "The house and wealth are inherited from the father, but a sensible wife is from the Lord." You can see this kind of contrast between a good wife and a bad wife. A nagging wife, he said in the previous verse. Verse 15 says, "Laziness induces deep sleep, and a lazy person will go hungry." There's a lot to say about that. Now, this is something when you talk about homelessness, the poor, you have to talk about this side as well. Um, there are hardships of life that produce poverty. But then there are the kind of hardships that comes from being lazy. If you're lazy, right? If you're lazy, he says you'll go hungry. Verse 16. "The one who keeps commands preserve himself. One who disregards his way will die." Now that is true. I kind of mentioned one of there was a few years ago, unfortunately, there was a guy, I don't know if he was wealthy, come from a wealthy background, but I think he was a college student. He went to North Korea of all places and acted a fool. And they arrested him. They tortured that boy, and then when the torture went bad, and this happened over time, because he actually was going to prison. But he did something foolish like how he insulted the president was tearing down posters or something like that. Tearing down posters, whatever. And they arrested him. He thought he was in America. That's foolish. And that's what I'm saying right here when he says he who keeps commands. Well, first of all, you should have understood the custom of the North Korea. They don't play. They don't have American constitutional rights. And when the torture over a period of time went bad, they shipped him home and he died. Died after he got here. Verse 17. Kindness to the poor is a loan to the Lord, and he will give a reward to the lender. Now, again, one of the interesting things about this, when we talk about the poor, because one of the questions we oftentimes are faced with, how do you know? How do you know? Kind of go back up to this verse right here. Look at verse 15. Laziness induce deep sleep, and a lazy person will go hungry. How do you difference between that and the 17? Kindness to the poor, the loan to the Lord, he will reward the lender. How do you know what makes a difference? Let me just say this. The Bible never really tells you to make a difference. So in other words, you're driving along the street, you see a person who's panhandling. Now you can decide to give that person $1 or not, right? A lot of people will try to say, well, what if he's out panhandling? Well, then don't, if you think that, don't give him any money. But if you do give him money, don't fret over it, because again, it's $1 that you chose to give. Verse 18, discipline your son while there is hope, and don't be intent on killing him. um, um, let's see here. I want to look at this from another. Uh, um, okay, I'm going to read this. This is from the ESV. It says, verse 18: discipline your son, for there is hope. Do not set your heart on putting him to death. Do not set your heart on putting him to death. Don't know why this is saying that. Let me go back to the New King James here. I want to read this because it's okay. So this is the New King James. By the way, this is what I'm kind of used to. Even after all these years of not reading the King James. Verse 18 says, chasing your son while there is hope, and do not set your heart on his destruction. So I just wanted to read that different kind of verse right here. The idea is that discipline, okay, discipline is extremely important to the raising of your child, or your son here, but child. The lack of discipline, and notice when he says here, discipline your son while there's hope. Well, when is there's the hope? The discipline is only effective if it is effective, and there is a timeline. So if I may use again some of what they call the formative years, that's going to be the best time for discipline. Once your kids get to a certain age, disciplining them in of itself doesn't help. It's not going to help them. When you say I can spank my children for discipline purpose, and like I say, you want to have wisdom in today's age. Let me just say this: if you're spanking your children, you should not be spanking them to the point of leaving marks, bruises on them. If you're doing that, you're going too far. The purpose of discipline is correction. That's the purpose. That's why it says discipline your son while there's hope. You want that to affect. Put it like this: will you be effective in disciplining a 15-year-old that disobeys you? In other words, if you can show me where a person now, just a child that benefits. In other words, a 15-year-old, 14-year-old. That's why I said discipline your son while there is hope. And if you're disciplining your children while there is hope, you won't have to do a lot of discipline, not in terms of spanking either. The discipline here is a little more general, but it is including but not limited to spankings, corrections, rebuke. Timeouts, I think, is a complete waste of time. I won't get into I think it is. I just think it's a complete waste of time. The point is, discipline your son while there's hope. And I think the other thing is that you ought to be very active in your kids' life from start to finish. Meaning that those 18 years, you ought to be extremely active in your children's life. Discipline is part, teaching is another, nurturing is another. All three should be equally um, um, in put into effect in your children's life. And then at some point, the discipline is going to shift not to from spankings and punishment to correction and rebuke. Because yes, at 15, you may go, "Why'd you get in the car with that person?" Or "Why this?" Whatever, right? But discipline your son while there's hope. In other words, when it can be effective. Verse 19. A person with great anger bears the penalty. If you rescue him, you have to do it again. One of the mistakes that I made, there was a guy when my daughters, when she was in high school. In anger, a guy, they were in school in the hallway, and in anger, something happened in anger. I think it was something where she got shoved into him or something, if I remember it correctly. But he turned around and he hit her, punched her, actually punched her. So the school was going to discipline him, but his mother was able to get my number called and said, "Look, I know he did a bad thing and he won't do it again. And look, don't get the police involved because it'll mess him up." And then I had a bleeding heart, and I said, "Okay, fine, as long as he, understands." Well, here's my point. Well, he did do it again, not to my daughter, but he did do it again. A person with great anger bears the penalty. If you rescue him, you have to do it again. How many times when you have seen people that react in anger, explode in anger, and they get they people cover it, people don't notice that they rescue them and they do it again and again and again. To me, they should bear the penalty. That is the one thing right now, they should bear the penalty. We live in a society where we cover up people's bad actions and they only do it again. Verse 20. Listen to counsel and receive instruction so that you may be wise later in life. Now, this is a part of, again, raising your kids. Listen to counsel and receive instruction. Why? Later on, that wisdom kicks in later in life. Verse 21. Many plans are in the man's hearts, but the Lord's decree will prevail. Now, so it doesn't matter what kind of plans you may have, just know God's decree. Verse 22. What is desirable in a man? What is desirable in a man is fidelity. Better to be a poor man than a liar. Now get back to this, because I think a lot of women would say, "Amen." What is desirable in a man is fidelity, faithfulness. Like I said, I think a lot of women would certainly say, "Amen." Verse 23, the fear of the Lord leads to life. One will sleep at night without danger. Notice that the fear of the Lord leads to life. Now, I think verse 22 again. What is desirable in a man is his fidelity. Better to be poor. Now, by the way, this fidelity, I wanted to say this. That's why I wanted to thought. The fidelity in and of itself wasn't between just a man and a woman, but fidelity, faithful in almost any area of life. That you can be true or faithful to your boss, faithful to society, right? Verse 23, the fear of the Lord leads to life, and one will sleep at night without danger. Verse 24, the slacker buries his hand in a bowl. He doesn't even bring it back to his mouth. Now, this is kind of really what you call throwing shade, excuse me, because he's saying the lazy man is so lazy he won't even lift his hand up. He just so lazy he just won't lift his hand up. Verse 25. Strike a mocker, and the inexperienced learn a lesson. Rebuke the discerning, and he gains knowledge. We kind of live in a society where we don't think rebuke, for some reason, we don't think rebuke is necessary. I don't know where we get that from, but you see this a lot, that we don't even want to tell people when they're wrong. He says, strike a mocker, and the inexperienced learn a lesson. And that's true. You see somebody, person smarting off, and they get slapped in the mouth, they'll learn. But notice he says, rebuke the discerning, and he gains knowledge. So I think too, this is kind of, never be afraid to correct someone. You may run across that discerning person. As a result, they will gain knowledge. Now I told you this earlier that when I was younger, I lacked knowledge. I lacked wisdom. I was gaining knowledge, the knowledge that I thought I was getting. I was hungry to learn God's word, but people would just avoid me instead of, let's put you aside and just let's correct you on some things. Verse 26. The one who assaults his father and evicts his mother is a disgraceful and shameful son. Okay. He says, if you stop listening to correction, my son, you will stray from the words of knowledge. Now again, same thing. A person who is not open, humble to receive knowledge. Notice he said you're going to, a correction, you're going to stray from knowledge. And they'll be the very ones that say, well, why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't anyone tell me? Right? Verse 28, a worthless witness mocks justice, and a wicked mouth swallows iniquity. Now, what he means by worthless witness, one who doesn't tell the truth. You don't understand, right? They don't tell the truth. And sometimes they do that to cover for people. Verse 29, judgments are prepared for mockers, and beatings for the back of fools. Now, when he says judgments, you can say judgments, punishments, correction. Notice he said they're prepared for mockers and beating for the back of fools. Kind of give you a little insight what he means then by the applying the rod. Notice they would beat the backs. And I'll say this. Back in the day, what was called a switch. What was called a switch, which was simply a branch that my grandparents would use. And they were quite effective. Okay. He said a switch, a rod for the back. Okay. So again, one of the greatest takeaways is, again, not pushing away correction, pushing away knowledge. Sometimes we want our way that we ignore wise counsel, and that is to our destruction. I want to do something. I want this. I want to marry this person. And you don't want to hear from anyone that may dissuade you. All right, guys, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comments section below. All comments are welcome. I'll see you in the next study.